bit of response from the people with regards to what's happening in Mount Sinai. When we actually went to where, this was news that was just coming out. But since then, you've actually done some research.
What I decided to do is I look at it from this point of view.
Yeah.
There are a couple of things here which are at issue. One is sovereignty, so
Right.
the right of a state to organise its own affairs without foreign interference and to make laws for its own country. So there's one legal issue there. The other one is respect of property rights.
Right.
And this is where these two concepts collide. So you have a situation where you have, as we said last time, these monks, and the monastery's been there since the 6th century AD, which is a very, very long time. What happened was in the 80s, the Egyptian government said, well, whoever has land that hasn't been registered in the cadastre, needs to be registered.
Yeah.
So the monastery applied to have all of its land holdings registered according to Egyptian law. And it's not just the monastery, there are metocha, there are different plots of land in different parts of the peninsula which they own. So that began in the 1980s. And the Egyptian government held that up. And the reason why that was held up is because they couldn't advance paperwork to verify their claim that it belongs to them. And you would have thought that there's such a thing called adverse possession, where even if you can't prove that it's yours through paperwork, the fact that you've occupied that place for eons should be enough to convince a government, a cadastral authority, that it is yours. No. So the whole idea was that the Egyptians said, you can't prove that it's yours or that you're legally entitled to it. Therefore, we need to have a bit of a chat about this, because if you can't prove, according to Egyptian law, this land belongs to Egypt, the Egyptian government, the Egyptian state. So there have been court cases. Starting 2015, there was a court case about this. So what happened a few weeks ago is that there was the outcome of the court, which says that, look, you can't show that it's your land, you haven't advanced any documents, therefore that land is Egyptian land. In terms of the monastery, there's a further complication. There's the law of antiquities that says that any antiquities that are in Egypt belong to the Egyptian state. And similar antiquity laws apply in other parts of the world, including Greece. No, you can't just go and whip stuff out. That's so Elgin. Elgin was last season. Can't do that anymore.
No.
Albania has similar laws, and we have this problem in Albania with Greek, or should I say Orthodox monasteries, especially in northern Epirus, that traditionally belong to the Orthodox Church, where the Albanian government said, no, this is Albanian government property because it's a classical national heritage item, so it belongs to us. And then you have a problem. So we built this, and not only did we build it, but we have been having services here for over 1,000 years or whatever it is. No, it belongs to the state. Similarly, what is the status of Islamic monuments in Greece? They belong to the state. They don't belong to a specific Sufi order or anything like that. They belong to the state.
Right.
That's a bit different. And the reason why that's different is because the people that lived there, used those monuments, no longer there. But the monastery has been in continuous use since the 6th century. So this is the complicated situation, which is Mount Sinai. You have property rights on one hand, state rights, and the idea of this being a cultural monument of significance and it going under the antiquities laws. So originally people were saying they're kicking the monks out and this is terrible, and then the Egyptian government said, no, we're not kicking the monks out. And then everyone said, okay, as you were, let's go home. It's fake news, and they dismissed the whole thing. But you can't dismiss it, because the issue is this: no, the monks are allowed to stay, but it is the Egyptian government that is saying you're allowed to stay.
Yeah, that's right.
Because these monks are there on visas which get renewed by the Egyptian government every year. They're not citizens. They're not considered native to the area. And
Really?
Not. Yeah, we spoke about Father Theophilus from Australia who lives there, and there are monks from Greece, other parts of the world who live there. The monastery is considered a cultural monument, which means that at any time the government can move in by law and expropriate it and take its assets, or it claims that those assets, all the treasures that belong there, belong to it. For the time being, it is tolerating or permitting or facilitating. They're allowed to stay there.
Right.
But it is at the good graces of the Egyptian government.
Right.
Now, Greece is still trying to sort this out with Egypt. And that in itself is another problem, because this is where it gets even more complicated. Mount Sinai is an independent autonomous church with its own archbishop, but it is under the Patriarch of Jerusalem. And the Patriarch of Jerusalem lives where? In Israel. Whereas Patriarchate of Alexandria, which is in Egypt, has no jurisdiction over that. So who are the players? You have a monastery that's been there since 6th century AD. I would have thought that's an Egyptian monastery. How long do you have to be somewhere and be part of that place's life before you're considered part of that place? It's an arbitrary distinction, isn't it, when you say that these people don't belong there? These ideas of sovereignty evolved through national states.
Correct.
Okay, so that was before then. But now, it's a different situation. But who are the players? You can say, well, Greece, Greek Orthodoxy, so they have a stakeholder. Most of the monks are Greek. But it's an Egyptian monastery in Egypt. To what extent does Greece have a say, should have a say? What about the rest of the Orthodox world? Question is, how invested are they? I was reading an article in Kathimerini where they were asking about Russian involvement, because we know that Russia's made a lot of inroads into Africa through missionary work in opposition to the Greek Orthodox Church. So
Really?
there's that aspect which we don't understand much about, and what's going on, if anything, because a lot of that could be fueled by paranoia. I don't think it's got anything to do with sovereignty, in my opinion.
Right.
You have an institution that's been there for a very long time through basic laws which apply across the board. Anglo-Saxon world with their own common law, or the Napoleonic Code, which Egypt follows, the base of it. Adverse possession laws. You occupy something for a very, very long period of time, it should be recognised as yours, even if you can't advance paperwork to show how it was bought because it's so old. It's a predominantly Muslim country in which the Christian minority, which is large, the Coptics, about 10 million, not treated very well.
Even to this day?
No. They don't have the same, I mean, on paper they have the same rights as their Muslim counterparts, but practically they face many difficulties. And that prejudice against Christian people applies across the board, many situations. And I think that there's a public policy component to this, which is that the Egyptian government doesn't want to be seen to be, I wouldn't say kowtowing to the Christians, but at least they want to be seen advancing a very robust point of view of sovereignty to show that the Christians are not getting the better of them. And let's look at it from the adverse. What happens if all of these Muslim groups that once lived, especially in northern Greece, Drama and the mosques there, say, well, you know what? We built these mosques, which they did. We want them and we want to use them and we want to control what happens to them. What happens? Greece's automatic reaction will be, well, look, these belong to the state. They're antique monuments, they're antiquity laws, and here we go around the merry-go-round. It's very complicated. And I think that it's sad that in this 21st century, monuments and institutions of great antiquity can't have their rights respected. But you look at what's happening in Turkey with the Ecumenical Patriarchate, where its land holdings are constantly questioned, where you have the orphanage in Principo. They couldn't get permits to do anything with it, and it's decaying. And now they're trying to see whether they can develop it into a hotel. I mean, the
school that was actually closed down?
Khalki is different. Yeah, well, Khalki cannot be used as a theological school. So there is, if you like, as we here in the Anglosphere understand it, no real respect of absolute property rights. The idea that I own a piece of property within its walls, subject to very broad guidelines, I can basically do what I want. That doesn't exist in many parts of the world.
Wow.
And not for legal reasons, but policy reasons and probably reasons that have to do with prejudice. So something to think about. We come from a world, you and I, here in Australia, it's a lovely place, we love it, where we consider certain things to be inalienable rights. But in a lot of parts of the world, that's not the case.
Right. So are we waiting to hear any additional information regarding, is it still in the courts or has it been all resolved now?
That's the other thing about living in the West. We're used to things resolving very quickly. We'll have a chat, we'll have a mediation, we'll go on air and we'll make a pronouncement. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. No, and that's it. These things take time. I mean, this is an issue that's been festering since the 80s.
Yeah.
It's not going to get solved anytime soon.
Yeah. Okay.
So, opsometha, as we say.